Welcome. I'm Janine Forrest, and we're welcoming you to Care Conversations, Transformation and Hope in the Face of Dementia. I will be the host for this morning, and I am also a dementia educator and care consultant. I do have a private practice called Dementia Coach on Call. It can be reached at dementiacoachoncall.com. So, I would like to start out by reading this important message. All content, including any potential medical information, is provided as an informational resource only and not to be used or relied on for any diagnostic or treatment process. It should not be used as a substitute for professional diagnosis, care, and treatment. Please consult your healthcare provider before making any healthcare decisions or for guidance about a specific medical condition. The opinions expressed and the content shared by me, Dr. Forrest, and my guests are not necessarily the opinions and content of the Dementia Society of America. The way I'd like to get started with dementia care conversations is just to make sure we're all on the same page and that you know KNOW, dementia. Dementia is considered an umbrella term that represents a variety of diseases or conditions that represents or presents itself in a way known as dementia. It's important to be aware that dementia is not a disease in itself. It's really a group of a variety of neurodegenerative conditions that express itself in very different ways in terms of behavior and thinking. So this gets you started to understand that there are many different types of underlying conditions, and the ones that you most are probably familiar with are things like Alzheimer's disease and vascular dementia or Lewy body or frontal temporal. So knowing dementia gets us on sort of the same page as we start into these dementia care conversations. Well, I'm really excited to present this year our first Dementia Unplugged Care conversation. We're really looking at interviewing people in the industry who are doing good work in the community, and that could be researchers, innovators, caregivers. And this will be a monthly live webinar, the first Monday of each month, in partnership with my private practice called Dementia Coach on Call. Also stay tuned because there will be other programs such as musical connections and artful insights. There'll be more information for these meaningful programs. And now I would like to get started with our very first guest, Kevin Jamieson, who is the founder, president, of Dementia Society of America, the end-all, be-all, who does it all and got it started. So I am just thrilled to start, again, this dementia care conversation with you, Kevin. So thank you.
Oh, it's a pleasure being here. Thank you. Thank you, Janine.
Okay. So I just want to let the audience know in terms of format, I'll be asking Kevin questions for about the next 30 minutes, and then we'll be opening it up to question and answer through the chat function. So if you have questions bubbling in your mind, please write them down and then enter them through the chat button when that time comes. Okay. So Kevin, I just want to start out by asking really what started this, your passion, your desire, your interest in dementia care? Can you kind of give us a little history of that?
Well, I didn't intend to be a dementia professional or an expert in the field. I did not start out thinking about that in my life. I was kind of a born salesperson and, started selling light bulbs door to door when I was about 12 years old. and had always been in sales and marketing most of my professional career. And so for me, dementia was something that I really wasn't familiar with, except that I'd had some exposure to my grandparents who had, in one form or another, some of them were considered eccentric. That was not the same as having dementia, but they were a little eccentric, and one in particular. And so my eccentric grandmother, who lived in Midtown Manhattan, she was just somebody we called a character, in some form or another. And she was a great woman. I really enjoyed, in many of my, much of my time with her. But after the death of her husband, her second husband, she definitely was more isolated in her Manhattan apartment, and things started to pile up, and, kind of became a hoarder's apartment. And yet all our family would go to see her, and we'd do our best to, go out and walk. And she and her late husband were always great walkers. So they were walking everywhere. But every once in a while, we'd get a call from neighbors or from, others that might have known her to say, there was something going on. This would be my mother who would get, either a call or, or from the super or from the doorman, or we'd go into Manhattan and we'd meet with her, and somebody would, pull us aside. My grandmother ultimately, was stuffing piles of $20 bills in her Gucci handbag and walking down the street, handing them out to doormen and, everywhere. And, we got really concerned. And so this was when she was living by herself. And so my mom was intent on bringing her back to our house, or my mother's house. At that time, I had moved out. And so she did, but unfortunately, it wasn't before long that it was very evident that there was something going on with her. And she ran out of the house without any clothes on. And she ended up, my mom had to call the police, and the police came and took her to the hospital, and she got admitted, and quite frankly, never came back to the house. She, at that point, moved into a nursing home and ultimately there wasn't really dementia care in the local nursing homes, but they did their best. And, she was up there, and, years wise, she was in her 80s at that point. And people would say that she had Alzheimer's disease, but I really didn't know what that was. And I'm not sure that she really did now, looking back. But one thing I am sure of is that she had challenges, that were cognitive. And yet there were these moments where I could sit and talk with her in the nursing home, and she was just her old self, so to speak. And I captured an image of her talking to my mother one time. I still have that photo. And this was back in the day, unfortunately, when they actually restrained people still in their chairs. And it was a really challenging time. But ultimately, she passed away, and I kind of, didn't really think about dementia or Alzheimer's or anything after that. And then many years went by, and there were some issues with my marriage. There were some challenges. I'd been married to a woman named Ginny for over 20 years. We'd been together longer than that. And she was a bit older than me, but we were having marital difficulty, and I really didn't understand why. And ultimately, I said to her, I really want to go to a therapist, a family therapist. And so she finally agreed to go, because she too was interested in having a happy relationship together. But she was more angry at me than anything else, it seemed. And so we went and we met with the therapist. And after probably almost 6 months or a year, the therapist pulled me aside and said, Kev, I think there's something going on with Ginny that is not really about your relationship. There's something else, and I can't put my finger on it. And I wasn't too sure what that all meant. But it just so happened that this was after several things happened in her life. The first and foremost was in April of 2001, she had a tremendous car accident. And she had a concussion. She was hit in the head in a kind of a T-bone accident. And back at that time, I mean, she had glass in her face. She had broken her arm and her shoulder and clavicle, I guess. And it was kind of back to work. I mean, after she recovered from that. And I was like, wow, that's okay. Let's keep going.
Yeah.
Also around that time, she had spinal stenosis that had been building up for years, and it became almost impossible for her to walk. And she ended up getting back surgery at a university in Philadelphia, near to where we live. And she underwent, hours and hours of intensive surgery to put some plates in and align her spine. And it actually worked wonders when she walked out of the hospital. It was an amazing thing to see. But while she was recovering and I was home from work helping her recover, we watched the plane hit the World Trade Towers on 9/11. And we knew that a friend of ours was in one of the towers because she worked in one of the towers. And we're both New Yorkers. I'm a born New Yorker. Ginny was born in New York City. My parents were from New York. So we had a real kinship to Manhattan and to New York and to the World Trade Center. I'd been at the World Trade Center a couple weeks earlier for dinner. And it was just really, really, really upsetting for us. So the stress, her back surgery, the concussion, and it wasn't her first concussion. I think she'd had others. She'd been a ski patroller, kind of an EMT, right? But she'd been knocked out several times skiing. She worked in a sports store, and she'd been rollerblading and knocked her head several times doing that. And I just think that there was this confluence of things going on. And she was on hormone replacement therapy, which at one time was thought to be protective against dementia. And then there was this large study out of Wisconsin that showed, well, maybe not so much. So there was all these things coming together. But the real key to me, and I had a neighbor come up to me and say to me one time that Ginny was speaking to her kind of in a garbled sense. And I was like, well, that's unusual. But I kind of, again, I dismissed it.
Sure.
One night we go out to dinner to a restaurant we'd been to before, and I noticed that she, picked up on the fact that I said hello to the hostess by name. And she goes, how do you know her? And I said, well, because last time we were here, and I remember because we sat over there, she had an unusual name. I remember saying hello to her, asking her what her name was. She goes, I've never been here before. What are you talking about? And it was kind of a light bulb moment for me that all the things that I'd seen and heard over the past year or two just kind of snapped together. And I thought, there's more to this than what meets the eye. And that kind of became, although I didn't know it at the time, even at that moment, that we were talking about potential dementia of any kind, but I knew that there was something that, we need to get to the bottom of. And I just started kind of the process of trying to figure out and looking for signs and other unusual behavior, and that all happened. That all started to happen, slowly over time. And I made notes and I talked to her doctor, and it took several years to get to the point where we got her into a memory clinic, so to speak, at a university setting. And that took a long time to go through what they call neuropsych exams and so forth, for the doctor to say, yes, dementia is potentially what Ginny has. It may or may not be consistent with Alzheimer's, but she definitely has dementia. And at that very moment, I thought, oh man, I got to figure this out with her, hopefully. But she was less self-aware, and her mindset was, where are we going for lunch? After we got the diagnosis and we were sitting together with the doctor, we walked out of the office and she wasn't crying or upset, at least visibly to me. She just simply said, where are we going for lunch?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that was a sign to me, again, a hopeful sign in some ways, a transformational sign, since this is about hope and transformation, that I really had to adjust my thinking because I knew she had different ways of thinking about it. And I had to figure that out quickly and come to terms with my own challenges about our relationship and about our future. And, I get a little teary-eyed when I think about it. But at the end of the day, I knew that she wanted to have as positive a future as possible. And that was me too, right? So for me, when I think about hope and I think about, why did I do what I do now, which is, run as a volunteer an organization that we started back in 2013, was basically because I spent a lot of years caring for her during that trajectory of her condition. And it progressively got worse and worse, as most dementias do. That's kind of the definition of a dementia, is that it's progressive. And I wanted to find the best ways to care for her and keep her safe and happy. Although, we have a hard time controlling whether somebody is happy or not, but we can go a long ways in helping people feel safe.
Yeah. If I could ask, so I hear a lot about, in your story, you were very proactive in a sense. I needed to do, but who else helped you in this journey? I mean,
A lot of people.
you obviously were an entrepreneur and had skills in your life and skill set that helped you move forward. But who in particular was helpful in this journey?
Yeah, I think we all have an opportunity to learn from others, and I was a sponge. I wanted to learn from others. Of course, I read a lot. I started to immediately try to get into understanding what dementia is and isn't, and a light bulb went off for me on that, which I still carry with me today. It's one of my stalwart missions, is to educate people about what dementia is and isn't. But I was helped by a lot of people, friends, dear friends. One was a doctor. He wasn't a practicing doctor. He was at a pharmaceutical company, but Bob, his name, and Bob just, he kept me on the track to get a diagnosis, number one. Number two is I opened up to family and friends right away, because she was having kind of those behaviors that people would look at and go, what's wrong? Like, is she mad at me, or is she not able to understand me? And so I let our neighbors know, I let our family know as soon as possible that there was a challenge. And they were very, very helpful, because not everybody, mind you, but most people were considerate and willing to give her leeway when there were challenges and help me. But most importantly, I was extremely lucky in that I didn't even know who I was hiring, but I ended up hiring a care manager.
Mm.
And by just total chance, I looked the person up on the internet. I was looking for a care, really home care. But what I found was a woman who literally lived 150 feet from us.
Okay.
And we didn't know. And she was a care manager. And she had a home care agency, but she also was, very much a a geriatric care manager. And I said, tell me, help me. And she was a big guide in going forward.
Yeah. Well, that was serendipitous because this was a while ago and care managers were not well known even a few years ago. And I think it's important that you're highlighting this group of individuals with such expertise to kind of guide family, caregivers along the way. What do you say to people who just automatically, it's all doom and gloom, and we know this is a progressive disease, and I will not be Pollyannish and take away the challenges and the difficulties that any dementia presents. But what was different about you? I guess I want to key on into that hope piece. What made you different?
Well, part of it was part of my natural tendencies to be a person filled with what I call positive self-expectancy.
Okay.
And that, comes from part of it's my background and upbringing. I just always had somebody, it was my dad or my mom or my uncle and others who, gave me kind of that positive outlook on life. So that was helpful. The other thing, though, was that, when I think about hope, it's kind of a wish, a dream, a desire, and those are all good and we all need hope. But kind of the transformation of hope is into action.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't always mean, that you rip apart the system and just immediately make 1,000 changes at once, although you can do that. But the idea is to start taking steps in a direction.
Oh.
And you hope that through guidance and good luck and other things that you transform your feelings of sorrow and anger and frustration, which all are there. They're still there for me today when I think about Jen, but that I transform them into something where I see a future state, a future embodiment of something good.
So tell us about then the Dementia Society of America piece. When did that concept, that idea, how did that start? From all of this, this background, this personal experience, and at what point did you think, oh, I can create DSA? I mean, I'd like to know more about that.
Yeah, I mean, Janine, it happened kind of in an instant, one of those points in time where you go, I've got to do this, because I'd been through the process of learning how to live with Ginny, just me and her and all the things that dementia bring along with it. She would try to leave the house. She, sat next to me on the couch and would say, I want to go home. Ultimately, it became, you're not my husband. So, I learned through all that, and I had brought care people in to live in the house, and then we moved her into a dementia care setting, and then into skilled nursing, and then into hospice. And as she went into hospice, I decided to retire, to really be there as much as I could for her. And that was the time when I looked around and said, I've learned so much. And I think a lot of people are confused about the difference between Alzheimer's and dementia. They don't understand necessarily the umbrella, just like with cancer being an umbrella, and then there's breast cancer, lung cancer, melanoma, leukemia, all kind of the types of diseases under the umbrella. I knew that people interchanged the word dementia and Alzheimer's, and I knew that wasn't necessarily technically correct. And how could I help educate others, not only about what dementia is and to get a good diagnosis and to look for the cause if possible, which has changed dramatically in the last 10, 15 years in terms of being able to diagnose somebody more precisely. It's much better than it ever was. But I really felt like there should be a dementia society. We knew there were Alzheimer's organizations, Lewy body organizations, frontotemporal organizations, but nobody that I could find was offering a national kind of dementia organization that would be there to help educate the public. And that's really what my skill set has always been, is to be able to educate people broadly with, as simple phrasing as possible, examples, resources, and I just knew that people were hungry for this information.
Yeah.
And so there wasn't an organization, and I decided, heck, I'm going to start it.
I love it. Oh, well, thank you. Thank you for that. And so, we're moving towards our 30 minutes ish time frame. What do you hope for the Dementia Society going forward? There's been a lot of work in the last years, but what are your hopes and sort of vision going forward?
Well, for me, it really is, kind of a very singular goal, which is education, because knowledge is power. And with that power, you can take actions that are meaningful. So for me, I have a thing called the Dementia Action Plan, 7 steps to take in the face of dementia. It's a 1-hour TV show that we produced, but it encapsulates everything about what we try to help folks do. And we know that you can read, you can watch a movie, you can look at YouTube videos, you can go to lectures and workshops, but if you don't do anything with that knowledge, it doesn't have as much impact. So our goal as the Dementia Society is get people to take action. One of the ways that I hope that happens over the years, and it's happening now, but I want to expand it, is that we have a toll-free number, 1-800-DEMENTIA. And there's a great story behind how we got that number. It was given to us as a gift. But 1-800-DEMENTIA, it spells, 1-800-DEMENTIA. So you just, push those numbers on your phone. And it's not, I always thought 1-800-FLOWERS, right? What a great idea. Well,
Right.
1-800-DEMENTIA.
Yeah.
And, so my ultimate goal for the Dementia Society is for people to know that they can pick up the phone and call us and get, basic answers to basic questions about dementia, like what it is, what it isn't, what's Lewy body, what's frontotemporal, what's vascular dementia, what's Alzheimer's, what can I expect, what's coming down the pike, how can I learn more, where can I learn to help my father, take a shower, where can I learn how to help my mother or my wife, get dressed every day? How can I stop them from going out of the house? Can I stop them from leaving the house? What should I do if they go out of the house? These are all the things that we get calls about, every week. Yeah, that's it. I mean, I want to have more of that. I want to be able to help people across the country that are living with these challenges.
Yeah. Well, you're so grounded in this, and the fact that you can list all of these questions it's obvious that you received these questions and you've lived those questions, and that's why this is, you're so credible and helpful. And I have to put a plug in for DSA. I just found this incredible volunteer organization to be such a gem and accessible. So at this point, what I'd like to do, if it's okay with you, Kevin, I want to open it up to the people who are listening in and to share their questions. So please. So
Jeannie, this is our first episode of Care Conversations. So, we're encouraging everybody now, this is all being recorded, and, we'd love it if you, would go to your chat function and just, enter a question.
Now, what didn't I ask Kevin that you would like to know. What helped you handle emotionally when your wife began not knowing who you were?
It was tough. It was kind of like the same thing when she and I sat on our couch together, and she said that she wanted to go home. And at first I said, Ginny, we are home. And she goes, no. I want to go home. I got to go home. I got to go now. And I'm like, Jen, it's okay. We're home. Look at us. She had a cat. The cat was in her lap, and she'd be like, just totally, I want to go home. The same feelings were when she, didn't recognize me as her husband. She basically said, I think you're somebody, and I even had somebody, an uncle one time who developed vascular dementia, we believe. He looked at me one time and said, "You know a lot about me." And this was an uncle that, definitely was a big factor in my life, somebody like a father figure, really. And so it's similar. And the issue for me was, I couldn't change how she felt. I had to kind of get in her head a little bit and play improv and just reassure her that I was somebody that loved her. And that was what's most important. I know you, Ginny, well, and I love you, and you're safe with me. And that type of, I had to give up my ego in the fact that I was her husband and really focus on her needs. And her needs were one of love and safety, security. And once I did that, it didn't necessarily 100% end the questioning of her or by her, but it made it easier for me, and it certainly gave her a little bit more comfort, I think, in that she at least was somebody that she knew she was safe.
I just want to emphasize that point. As I work with families as an educator and coach, people often get frustrated. They can't convince the person what's right or wrong, or why can't they think a certain way, the reasonable way. And my response is often, what's more important, for you to be right or for that person to feel well loved? And that takes a little while to kind of wrap around when we're so used to being rational and reasonable, and when that ability no longer exists, to make the focus be out of helping that person feel well loved. So it sounds like you did that without even having that coaching. Let's go on to the next question, Kevin. Here we go. What is a care manager?
So that's a really great question. A lot of people don't know that much about care managers. Care managers come from a variety of backgrounds, and I'm not the expert on all that they do, but I will say this, that we're members of something called the Aging Life Care Association, ALCA, ALCA. And as such, we have access to their membership across the country, and we leverage that membership anytime we can. A lot of times we strongly suggest that somebody find a care manager. And they were called geriatric care managers for many, many years. But because they deal with all sorts of folks and not only older adults, they're using the word geriatric less and less. But a care manager can typically be a nurse or a licensed social worker or some other type of profession that lends itself to the care management. And they do have to meet certain qualifications to be members of this ALCA organization. But I would say that a care manager basically is somebody that can be an advocate for you and for your loved one. And if you're the one with dementia or experiencing mild cognitive impairment of some kind, some challenge, they can help you too. I mean, it just doesn't have to be that you're a caregiver. You can be a person that needs that help. And they're paid, they're paid by the hour, kind of like hiring an accountant, not like hiring a lawyer in terms of cost. So they're reasonable, but they can help map out a care plan looking forward because they've been there, done that. They've helped, maybe hundreds of people, maybe more, but certainly hundreds of people typically who've been exactly where you are. And because they've been down that path, it's not a strange route for them, and they know what's coming and they can help you plan for that. And I think planning ahead is key, and knowing what's coming is key. Otherwise, you just are filled with fear and anxiety about the future. So having some knowledge and learning about what's coming is very critical to the care of the person who's living with the dementia or the cognitive impairment, but it's also critical to the person who's the caregiver because, you have high anxiety too. And they can help manage relationships with the doctor, with a nursing home, with a memory care, with medications. They can look at all those things, how the person may be able to live at home, not live at home. All of those types of questions can be asked of a care manager, and the care manager can get involved.
Yeah, a lot of skills. And again, I just want to highlight here what you said, that dementia here is really a sort of a family condition. It ripples to everyone involved for the most part. So the fact that you address the anxiety, not only of the person living with dementia, but the spouse, we have to take care of all of them. Okay.
Yes.
The question here is, what kind of doctor do you see for the initial diagnosis?
Well, and in some cases, although you're interviewing me on this care conversation, you know a lot about the subject matter. And so I'll try not to be the expert as much as you are. But I will say that everybody typically starts with their primary care physician. I mean, that's kind of where you have to start. And I have to say that a lot of primary care physicians, are not necessarily eager to get into the cognitive impairment discussion.
Right.
They just aren't,
Well, they're not eager, and they're not, unfortunately, not as equipped. Not all medical schools, especially people who've been medical physicians, medical providers in that role.
Yes.
This is still a new skill set for them. So
they don't have a lot of tools. They have maybe, what they call the mini mental, which is kind of a screener for certain types of things, which people can do really well at and then fall apart when they walk out of the office.
Absolutely.
And they also, with HIPAA and with some of the other concerns, they're unwilling, maybe even, or unable to talk with people that don't have the privilege, not the privilege, but the okay of the person. They don't have the person with the dementia or with the cognitive impairment saying, yes, it's okay to talk to my son, my daughter, my husband, my wife. And so, before we even talk about what doctors to talk about, what would be important is to start by saying, can I get access to be able to speak to the doctor on your behalf or in conjunction with you, or even come to some of the appointments with you? And, it's challenging. I mean, my wife was initially totally resistant to, bringing it up with the doctor. But, over time, I had made a list of things that I'd seen, and I finally just decided that we had to figure this out and kind of force my way into the discussion, with the doctor's help ultimately. But then once you see your primary care, they may, and hopefully they do, recommend that you maybe see a geriatrician. But if not, they typically will suggest a psychiatrist because they're not sure whether it's a psychiatric issue in the early stages. Sometimes it can be. and they can separate the wheat from the chaff in terms of
Yeah.
the situation. And then a neurologist is where you want to
Right.
end up with, and you want to end up with a cognitive neurologist, right? Because they have subspecialties. So you want to be in the right group. And then there are universities, typically universities that have, they call them memory care clinics or memory clinics. And that's fantastic, right? Because they've got a whole swath of people, including social workers and others, that psychologists, psychiatrists, geriatricians, neurologists, and internists, and so forth.
Yeah, it's a full day workup. Here's a question here. My father needs in-home health care, but he refuses to be, quote, babysat. Do you have any suggestions?
Yeah, so lots of challenges in overcoming people's resistance, right, to care. So at least with Ginny, and I know this is true with others too, I mean, there are a couple things can happen. One is, and I did this with her situation, I had certain things happen that together we recognized that it wasn't, she wasn't able to do certain things as much as she'd liked. Making coffee, making a meal became difficult. And she was a great cook and, could whip up a meal, never used a recipe, but she really found it hard. And yet she loved her morning coffee. She loved a great pasta, and ultimately, because I traveled as well a lot during this time period, I felt like I could bring somebody in that would just help her fix a meal. Mm-hmm. And that's how we presented it. Or that they were there to clean. Yeah. And she was a cleaning freak, she just loved cleaning when she wasn't cleaning as much. So I think she had that desire to have a clean house, and she had a desire to have a good meal. So we started there. Mm-hmm. And then the people that were brought in became her friends. Mm-hmm. And it's critical that the people that you bring into the house are not only trustworthy, so that goes to the issue of which agencies and how you do that. But you can use friends and family and others, but they have to have a sense of empathy for the person and a liking of the person. And that way, the person who's got the cognitive challenges will like them.
Yes.
So, it's this bonding that occurs.
Yeah.
And then it can kind of progress into not babysitting, but companionship. A lot of people are isolated.
Yeah. And one of the big issues is that people with dementia lose the insight or self-awareness that they need the help. And so I often coach families to say, well, I need the help. I'm the one who needs the assistance. And it makes it sometimes a little more easy to negotiate that conversation.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Well, one more question here, but it's just about time to wrap out. What were the most helpful and least helpful things people said to you, perhaps during, your marriage while you were living this experience? Maybe we could wrap up with that question.
For me, and I think for Ginny as well, but, she lost a lot of her ability to express herself. And that's what happens as dementia progresses, verbal, the ability to verbalize and so forth becomes less and less. But there's still other ways in which you can help people through music and art and movement and holding their hand. But kind of wrapped around that whole issue is having other people come to see her and be with me and be with her. So it's not the things that they said, but the things they did. And what I found the most helpful was when other people would come to see Ginny, with or without me there. And the most unhelpful thing was when people wouldn't come to see her. And I begged certain people to please come visit Ginny. No, she's not exactly the person that you knew her to be, but she's still a wonderful, beautiful woman who has life in her and needs to, even if she can't speak with you, wants to see you.
Mhm.
And I do remember in hospice, and she was, it was hard for her to respond to things, maybe a yes or a no, but she hadn't even spoken in months when she entered hospice. And I asked one of her relatives to come see her, and he was willing. He wanted to. He walked in the door. She had not expressed anything, just a blank stare for days. And she came alive and smiled and almost wanted to reach out
Wow.
to somebody that she'd grown up with as a child, as her cousin. And that was the most meaningful moment for me, one of the most meaningful moments at the end of her life, because I know that it brought her joy to see that person. And it was hard for the other person. They couldn't stay in the room very long. But so it's really about doing more than even saying.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a quote that I read: "It may not mean anything to me later," meaning the person with dementia, 20 minutes from now, but it means everything in the moment. And I think that, to kind of end on this idea that hope can be in the moment, and that's still a beautiful thing. And so we hope for those moments
Hope
of
is in
joy
the
and
moment.
connection.
Hope is in the moment. You always hold hope out as a positive future. And the transformation is that you accept whatever comes your way.
Yes. Yes.
And you hold those two in balance. They're almost like in tension with one another. And that really defines the experience that I think a lot of people have. So, I appreciate the fact that, we were able to talk about this today.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, everyone who has been with us on this call today. We appreciate your questions. We appreciate your participation, your support of the Dementia Society of America. And we hope that you'll join us next month, the first Monday of every month, for Care Conversations. There'll be a variety of different topics that I'll be addressing with different experts and caregivers. And also stay tuned, as I said, for the arts and information on music in terms of Dementia Unplugged. So we're expanding the program. So again, Kevin, thank you for your time, sharing your life experience and your transformation and hope.
That's it.
All right, everyone.
Thank
Take
you.
good care.
Be well.